Hi, my name is Michael Nyo, and for my thesis project, I will be investigating prescription opioid addiction as well as the implications of designing a rehabilitation facility. The proposed project will not just focus on the traditional medical program, but rather be amplified by a connection to nature, the destigmatization of addiction, and the successful reintegration of addicts back into society. And as such, I present to you my project, Detox, the rehabilitation and reintegration of prescription opioid addicts. Anybody can become addicted to prescription opioids. The victims of this epidemic vary greatly in both age, ethnicity, gender, as well as socioeconomic backgrounds. The stigma society places on addicts often causes them to not seek help. It is no secret that doctors in America prescribe opioids when it is not necessarily required, and when they do, they often prescribe way more than needed. The United States consumes the most amount of daily opioids compared to any other country in the world, over 12,000 doses per million people higher than the next country. This problem has just been getting worse and worse over time. Yearly opioid overdoses are now at an all-time high. Drugs of any kind are often seen as an escape from reality. In many cases, this is how addiction begins. But after a period of abuse, addicts find themselves as prisoners of their own addiction. The downward spiral of addiction begins with the initial use of the substance. From there, the individual begins to use it regularly and then eventually abuse it. They build up a tolerance to it and often require more and more of the substance to feel the desired effect. They then build a physical dependence on it. Addiction is defined as when this dependency develops into a chronic disease, where self-control becomes impaired. Oftentimes, addicts will then try to seek out help, but can often relapse back to previous stages. Addiction is often a response to problems in a person's life. It can stem from a history of physical or mental abuse. Addiction is also genetic. Certain genes can increase the reward caused by a drug upon the first use, making some people more susceptible to become addicted. Poverty is also a marker of addiction. The psychological impact that poverty has can push people to abuse substances as a response. The recovery process follows this organization. Pre-contemplation is when a person has no issue with their addiction. They feel that they are either in control or have no desire to change, or feel that they are so far gone that change just isn't possible. Contemplation begins when addicts acknowledge their disease and start to think about making a change. In the preparation phase, a person is now committed and are ready to take action. An action refers to a real change in behavior, such as beginning a self-detox or checking into a clinic. Maintaining this action is the most difficult part. Here is where a person begins to come to terms with their long-term commitment, and oftentimes people relapse at this phase and revert back to pre-contemplation or contemplation. Termination is when addicts have broken the cycle completely and are now at little to no risk of relapse. Addiction is not a linear process. 40 to 60% of addicts relapse within the first 30 days of leaving a treatment center, and nearly 85% relapse within the first year. Several variables include physical surroundings, interpersonal relationships, as well as depression, which can trigger a relapse. And addressing these issues during the rehabilitation process is key to breaking this cycle. Only time and consistency can truly heal addiction, and as such, the risk of a relapse will naturally reduce over time, but never fully disappear. The benefits of nature in regards to healing is common knowledge. Humans were born of nature, and as a result are subconsciously inclined to seek it out. Hospitals are often some of the most unnatural places in the world. Sterile white walls, technology and screens everywhere, and harsh LED task lighting. Addiction is as much of a psychological problem as it is a physiological one, and thus a strong connection to nature is required when designing a rehabilitation facility. In order to improve this connection to nature, I have selected a vacant site in Carmel, California, which is situated directly on the Pacific Ocean. The highly natural condition of the site will enhance and reinforce the medical program. The selected site is bound by Highway 1, which runs north to south from San Francisco to Los Angeles, as well as the Pacific Ocean, which is roughly a 30 to 40 foot drop below the level of the site. The direct architectural context is entirely low-rise residential. The location is about an hour and a half from San Francisco Bay Area and 10 minutes south from downtown Carmel. The community already has a large medical presence, with healthcare making up 21% of Monterey County's yearly business revenue. The program is broken into 4 ideas: detox, consciousness, destigmatize, and reintegrate. Detox refers to the initial detox process itself. This portion of the project will contain the sleeping units for the patients, as well as the adjacent staff and medical spaces. From here, the focus shifts from a physiological to a psychological healing. Consciousness refers to a program that builds positive habits. and creates an addiction to life rather than substance. And these spaces include therapy areas as well as a connection to nature, gyms, as well as access to walking trails. Destigmatizing recovery is essential in convincing addicts to come forward and seek help. This program will activate the community and bring them onto the site through the creation of a public market. Here, local farmers as well as patients of the facility can sell produce grown on and off-site, and this will provide chance encounters between tourists, locals, and patients, helping to bridge the divide between these two groups. The final stage of recovery is reintegration. This portion of the project will provide spaces that seek to make this reintegration as successful as possible. So the first precedent I've chosen is the Alzheimer's Day Center by GCA Architects, and I've chosen this precedent because of its human scale, the materials, as well as its strong connection to nature. So the next precedent I've chosen is the Kutek Puat Hospital, and I've chosen this precedent because of its strong connection to nature, the fact that nature is the central refuge space that really defines the massing of the building itself, as well as its circulation and the views over the water. So the final precedent that I've chosen is the Caring Cabin by TV Architects. And the reason I chose this precedent is because of the human scale that it's at, really keeping everything feeling like home through its materiality, as well as its strong connection to nature. So these are some literary sources that I found extremely helpful during my research, as well as the design phase of this thesis project. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to your comments.